Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bryn Jackson, and I'm the Assistant Curator of Audience Engagement and Performance at Newfields. For those of you who were unable to join us yesterday, I'll give you all just a brief rundown about the project and why we are here today. In 1978, Mónica Mayer presented El Tendedero, or The Clothesline, an installation at El Museo de Arte Moderno in Mexico City. This artwork invited women of different ages, occupations, and neighborhoods to respond to the phrase, "As a woman, what I dislike most about the city is," on small pink slips, which were placed on a 3x2 meter clothesline. Most answers denounced sexual harassment in the street and public transport. Since then, El Tendedero has been activated more than 30 times across the globe in vastly different communities, responding to issues of violence against women. In 2019, Women4Change, an organization whose mission is to educate, equip, and mobilize Hoosiers to create positive change for women, invited the artist to activate El Tendedero in Indianapolis. This initiative, which was collaboratively realized through more than 70 partnerships, resulted in more than 1,500 responses from women in each of Indiana's 92 counties, collected over the course of 150 programs. These note cards were ultimately presented at the Indiana State House on March 5th of this year to raise awareness among state lawmakers of the extent to which women experience sexual harassment and assault, with the goal of persuading them to create legislation that defines consent. It is with great pleasure that I announce to you all today that the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields will be bringing this historic work into our collection to ensure that women will continue to have a platform from which to voice their experiences, in the hopes that we may one day bring an end to rape culture. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Women4Change for organizing this historic collaboration. Thank you as well to Mónica Mayer for bringing this important work to Indiana. And finally, thank you to Ann M. Stack, without whose generous support and commitment to the health and well-being of our community, this project would not be possible. Here to hold a discussion on art and its intersection with activism, particularly as it pertains to the systemic oppression of women, are artist Mónica Mayer and Executive Director of Women4Change, Rima Shahid. Mónica Mayer studied visual arts in Mexico, received an MA in Sociology of Art from Goddard College, and participated in the Feminist Studio Workshop at the Women's Building in Los Angeles. Her work as an artist includes performances, drawing, writing, teaching, and activism. She founded Polvo de Gallina Negra, or Black Hen's Dust, which was the first feminist art collective in Mexico, with Maris Bustamante in 1983. In 1989, with Victor Lerma, she started Pinto Miraya, a long-term applied conceptual art project whose goal is to lubricate the art system and has led to the creation of an important archive. Mayer has published several books, including Rosa Chillante, Mujeres y Performance in Mexico, or Bright Pink, Women and Performance in Mexico. She had a column in El Universal, a newspaper, for 20 years. She has participated in major international exhibitions such as WAC, Art and the Feminist Revolution at the Museum of Contemporary Art in LA, and MoMA PS1, as well as Radical Women, Latin American Art, 1960 to 1985 at the Hammer Museum. She is a member of the Sistema Nacional de Creadores, or the National System of Creators, with a project on art and archives. Rima Shahid has served as the first executive director of Women4Change since 2017. Before Women4Change, Rima served as the executive director of the Muslim Alliance of Indiana and spent more than a decade working as the trade development officer and cultural attaché at the Pakistan Embassy in Bahrain. With a passion for advocacy and collaborative philosophy, Rima brings a unique perspective to community outreach objectives. She lives in central Indiana with her husband, Munib, and their 3 children. This discussion will be moderated by Shannon Linker. Shannon is the Vice President of Artist Services and Engagement for the Arts Council of Indianapolis. She has been with the council for 18 years. She oversees all programming and services for artists, including the Indianapolis Arts Garden, public art at the Arts Council, and Gallery 924. Along with curating and managing the council's contemporary gallery space, Shannon serves the local professional artist community by creating programs and services intended to help build their careers. In 2004, Shannon led the development of the Arts Council's first artist services programming that focused on professional development, e-communications, and roundtable discussions with artists to discover the current needs of professional artists of all disciplines. Shannon has taught art history at the college level for 6 years and served on the advisory board for the Indianapolis Downtown Artists and Dealers Association for 7 years. She currently serves on the advisory board of the Ivy Tech Community College of Fine Arts and Design, as well as serves as chairperson for the Public Art for Neighborhood Selection Committee, a program of the Arts Council of Indianapolis and the City of Indianapolis, and is a member of the board of directors for Indiana Artisan. She holds a BFA in art history from the University of North Texas and an MA in art history from Texas Women's University. Before we jump in, if you have any questions, please be sure to post them throughout the chat. You can feel free to post them throughout this discussion, and I'll be sure to include them in a Q&A after the presentation. So at this point, I will go ahead and pass the mic over to Shannon.
Thank you, Bryn. Thanks, Lindsay, and the entire Newfields team as well for your great work bringing this series to the city. It is truly an honor to be a part of the conversation today. As a young art history major in the late 80s and early 90s, my focus was the feminist art movement of the 70s and how the newer feminist artists of the 80s met with that or connected or didn't. And so this work and artists like Monica have been an important part of my work my entire career. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I did want to start today with a little bit of shameless self-promotion, if I may. One of the ways I've been involved with the Clothesline, the El Tendedero Indiana project, is by hosting and curating an exhibition at Gallery 924 at the Arts Council. The show is up now and features 3 talented artists who are all passionate about this subject. Darlene Delbecq is an image-based artist from Indiana. Beatriz Vasquez is an Indianapolis-based artist inspired by the Mexican tradition of papel picado, or cut paper. And Samantha Veach is associate photographer here at Newfields. We called this show Homage and Celebration because it really is about honoring the incredible work of Mónica Mayer and also celebrating the fact that a group like Women4Change Indiana exists in the first place. It's not only grown stronger over the past 4 years, but continues to have impact on our community on many levels. The idea that a social political activist group would specifically recognize art as a means to create change and bring an international artist to Indiana while engaging 75 organizations in over 150 events, it's all pretty incredible and deserves a celebration, to be sure. So hopefully this show will serve as that for our community. If you're able to come see the show in person, that's wonderful. We're open by appointment, but if not, there is a virtual tour and you can find that on our website at indiarts.org. You can also find that link in the chat as well. So to move on with our discussion, Monica and Rima, thank you both so much for being here today and for having the conversation with us. I hope that most of our guests, as Bryn said, were here yesterday to hear the presentation given by Monica and feminist art historian and curator from Mexico City, Kieran Cordero Riemann. It was fascinating as they described the Clothesline Project and how it evolved from the initial exhibition in 1978 through all the iterations and locations all over the world. That presentation brought up a lot of new questions and ideas for me for our talk today. So I would love to start with you, Rima, on how this project came to be. So as I understand it, one individual member of your group brought the idea to a meeting. So first of all, that is inspiring to us as an arts community, that an arts patron could engage a large, diverse social, political organization in the idea that art has the power to affect change and get such an incredible buy-in and support. It also strikes me as an excellent example of how many of us have thought about, I'm so frustrated about this situation, whatever it may be, whatever case it may be, but I'm just one person, and what can I really do? As it turns out, a lot. You can do a lot. So Rima, can you talk about that idea of your group taking on this project as art as activism and the idea of the individual as potential catalyst for change?
Yes, I first wanted to say thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation, and thank you, Shannon and Bryn, Lindsay, Monica, for being with us. As challenging as the virtual world is, it does have some perks, like bringing together people from across locations for a conversation. So here's one positive that we can look at during this time of uncertainty. And it's true, we had an engaged member, we have this group called the Women Changemakers that hosted panel discussions and brought to light different issues that affect not only women, but everyone in Indiana. What we know is when something affects a woman, it doesn't affect that individual woman, but being a woman, it affects the entire community around her. And so we can't look at these issues like siloed individual women's issues. They are issues that affect all Hoosiers. And we would have a representative from across the aisle that would speak at these discussions, community members, and we saw that those opportunities to engage in meaningful discussions as a catalyst for change. And then that individual brought us this amazing opportunity to Indianapolis, and we were thrilled. But this also, I hope, for anybody that's listening and now, or will listen in later, know that at Women4Change, anybody can come and say, listen, we have this opportunity to make meaningful, impactful change, and this is how we'd like to do it. And that's how we know that we want to be representative of all women and people in Indiana, but that everybody has a place at Women4Change. It is made up of a group of individuals. It's not just your staff and your board, but that's how movements are created and how movements are sustained, is by those individuals in the community that engage with them. And that's how we hope to have this longevity. And because of this individual, and because of Monica, and because of the 1,500 people from all 92 counties that wrote postcards, for the first time in our state's history, the bill was studied during the interim study committee. Folks will tell you that this bill they were advocating for this bill for decades. And we made progress, and that's because we saw an intersection between arts and civics, elected officials, and in a way that I haven't seen before. I'm a Hoosier native, and I've really not seen anything like this. And so we're just so thrilled again to be a part of today's conversation, to be able to share the clothesline with Newfields and others, and hope that this inspires people to continue to engage with the organization and to be able to create other opportunities to continue to affect change.
Thank you, Rima. That's amazing. What was able to happen from that one catalyst. And I love that your organization is open to anyone being that. And so that's incredible. So Monica, can you talk a little bit about that idea of collective action? And obviously that was such an important part of feminist art movements in the 70s, and clearly how Women4Change have made an impact as well. The stats that Rima just talked about in Indiana is pretty amazing. Can you share a little bit about the importance of collective action in social practice art, and your art specifically?
Hello, well, it's very nice to be here. I think one of the things I remember the most from participating at the Women's Building in the 70s was that the building itself included artists and included activists and the bookstore. So when you got Judy Chicago's opening in San Francisco, it was not surprising. There was this strong relationship between art and the community. You weren't doing art for an elite, but for a very wide community. So when Judy Chicago's show opened, there were 250,000 people visiting it, because somehow or other, the art managed to be something that was part of the community, which I think is essential, because I think I mentioned a bit yesterday, art is an important way to change culture. And what we're trying to do here is to change culture. So it's an art that has to do with the community. It is sustained because of the community. It responds to the community. And if I think maybe the way I explain it to myself is that whenever I'm speaking, even if I'm speaking of my own experience, it's not in a very personal, my own single experience, but a general I. This is I, like in I, you, him, her, the pronoun. It's this general, it's my experience, but it's also everybody's experience. I'm particularly thrilled how it's worked in Indiana. I had never seen it used to change something that had to do with the law. I think it has very often been used to denounce what doesn't work in the system and what doesn't work with the laws, but not how it has worked here. And I was just thinking right now that one of the things that I feel happened with art getting together with a political action in this particular case is that the script was changed. Usually the script I have seen when we want to change laws is that of anger, which we're perfectly right to be angry about many things and want to change them. But it reminded me of a group here in Mexico called the Daughters of Violence, which is a theater performance feminist art group. And they go out in the street and whenever they're harassed, they have a gun with confetti and they'll point it at the harassers and start singing a rap. And then the harassers don't know what to do because they've changed the script, you know? And I'm very worrying usually. I say, there's something is going to happen to you in the street and please be careful, and you don't know how these guys will react. And they say, no, they're usually too confused. So they have to listen because they don't go into their original, in their sort of natural way of reacting. And I think this is what happened here. I'm sure the legislators had heard about these problems, but they were able to hear about them in a different way. And that huge wall of pink slips, when I saw it on March the 5th, I was, you know, it really made a difference at the impact and the strength. And the fact that it's community-based and that it's been from all the counties, I think has given it a strength that is very, very moving. So I have learned a lot from the way this clothesline has developed.
I love that. I love the idea of changing the script and getting a different result instead of trying to, you know, stick with what hasn't worked in the past. That's a great learning for all of us, I think. Rima, do you think, or have the other initiatives and the specific causes that your group has gone after to try to create this change, have they been as widespread, like 75 organizations engaged in one idea? Has that happened before, or is this pretty unique to this particular project?
Shannon, you got me, because I wish I could say that this happens with every one of our projects, and this is not new to Women4Change. We collaborate with arts organizations and bring in input from all 92 counties with everything we do. But a quick search of our website will tell you otherwise. And so it's true, we have not seen this before. This is very new, and kind of going back to what I said, that we have to, and I appreciated Monica's comments always, but particularly we have to see what's not working in our approach, and have individuals come to us and say, you know, there's this opportunity, we can engage this way, and we've seen that it works. But while this is unique, while we haven't had 75 organizations working together with us on an issue or input from all 92 counties, this isn't the first time that an individual has come to us with an opportunity to address legislation, and that's something that we're very thankful for. Is that continued community engagement and community activism and individual advocacy, but using Women4Change as a platform.
Right. Well, I would like to think that maybe the diverse outreach and the number of organizations, really that has something to do with the art. The fact that the arts are such a perfect example of how you can connect with people, and other things don't have that advantage that artists and arts do. So I'm just gonna say that and think that that is true. And
I think it is true.
All right. So we're going to move on just a little bit. Rima, yesterday in the conversation, Monica said that she was talking about social media and the fact that it is just not enough. A lot of people post something on social media and think, okay, I'm done, I've done my part, and they just kind of move on. And so she was talking about how you have to be out in the street talking to people. And so can you talk a little bit about that in your role and with Women4Change? Is that something, especially in this time of social media takeover is everywhere, how do you get people to get off of social media and out in the community, and how has that worked? And does art help with that? I think from our conversation it obviously does, but can you speak to that a little bit?
I think that social media and media as a whole, they have their advantages. Like I said, we're all together, yet in such different locations today. Same is true with social media. It does have its advantages. We're able to disseminate information very quickly. We're able to inform and engage a very large, diverse network of people. I was recently informed that we have folks that follow Women4Change in other parts of the country and in other parts of the world, far that are not connected. So it does have its advantages, but I will also say that in-person interaction, getting to that really grassroots level of having deep, meaningful interactions and conversations, you can't get that from social media. You can't get, being at the State House on March 5th and a little girl, think she had to be 7 or 8 years old, came up to me and asked me if she could write on one of the postcards. And being a mother myself, I said, well, you have to ask the adult that's with you, your caregiver, whomever that is. And sure enough, there was someone in the back, it was her mother. And she said, yes, she can write on one. She was sexually assaulted. This little girl was, and they drove down from what we call in Indiana, the region, right? Close to that border with Illinois. They drove down to participate in that event on March 5th. That little girl was sexually assaulted. There was nothing that they were able to do for that little girl. And that's why she wanted to be there to participate in that event. And that's something that you're never going to get with social media.
Wow, that is so true. That is incredibly heartbreaking. And I know that all of us who have participated in this have heard story after story of similar cases that it's a powerful project, powerful stories. Monica, can you talk a little bit about that too? Because you were the one that yesterday brought it up, the idea of social media, and how do you find it a challenge to get younger artists and activists to leave social media and get out in the streets, as it were?
For me, it's interesting because coming from the generation in the 70s and 80s that used mail art and used all this other kind of networking, and having here in Mexico and then having been at the Women's Building, I'm very much into building community and networks, whether by post, which was very difficult because you had to leak every envelope before you send it to the community, or by the media. So for example, the Clothesline Facebook group started in 2008. It was the first thing I opened. And it has been a basic tool for my work in this project and in another project I have that has to do with hugs, and that's a no-no today, the hug project. But in a project that has to do with motherhood and the different ideas of motherhood today. And I think, or the way I tend to work with it is to work with both. Media helps me to get in touch, and then I have, even if it's through internet, I have a close contact. So I think maybe the challenge is, how do we make the social media also give us those those spaces of close contact. Thinking about this as well is how do you maintain the network you've already created throughout the state, which I think is amazing, and have those groups get closer to other groups through smaller reunions and stuff, because I don't think we're going to be able to get together in person, which is definitely the nicest way of doing it, and the most touching. Stories like the one you mentioned of this young little girl, I think are a constant with the Clothesline. When you're up there and reading the answers, and then you're able to share, there's no other way of feeling accompanied in the sorrow and strong in the possibilities of doing this. I can also imagine how that little girl felt, that all these voices were behind her now, that she was not alone and that she was able to do this. So yes, we don't have that right now, but there's no way we can stop. Even if we have these other obstacles today, I mean, I see it here. I repeat it all the time. We're up to, in Mexico, 11 feminicides every day. We're hearing about harassment through the media of students and teachers who harass young women, students through the media, because now everybody's at home, at least here, doing school. So we have to come up with ways of working with this, you know. But I think that we're doing it. I mean, here we are, finding other ways to do it.
That's right. We are finding ways. We're doing things we never thought that we could, and reaching people we never thought that we could. As Rima said, all over the world, people paying attention. And I think that from what I've heard from Ann Stack, who is very active and as I understand it, is the woman with the idea. So we have her to thank for that. She is very much interested and committed to continuing this project well beyond this year and well beyond the virus. So, and I believe that she will do that. So that's good news to know there's more in store. So this next question is for both of you, and it sort of relates to this idea of the being out in the community, but it's more specific to the idea of an artwork in a museum. And we just learned from Bren that Newfields is acquiring an iteration of the Clothesline, which is fantastic news, and it's a wonderful addition to their collection and to the city of Indianapolis. So we're all thrilled about that. But for this type of social activism artwork, how important is it to not only have it collected in the museum, but to get the work outside of the museum, to make sure that it doesn't stay in the museum, that it's in schools, that it's on the city streets and bus stations and non-arts institutions, for either or both of you?
If you want, I can start. I think it's a piece that from the very beginning, it started at in a museum, and the next one was in the street. Most of them, what ends up in the museum is the result of what happened in the street. This clothesline, the Indiana clothesline, wouldn't exist without the community and without being presented in different centers and in the streets. So I think it's a way of having it like ping pong From the street, it comes into the museum. And what I'm interested in with having the clothesline in museums is the possibility of it eventually going back out in the street, because it's a useless piece if it's just like if it's a mausoleum for the piece and it just sits there as history, then it really doesn't make any sense for me. For me, it makes sense as long as it's reverberating, bringing up new questions, giving space for other questions and other groups and other forms of it becoming active in the streets. I think maybe Karen talked a bit about this yesterday, of how we think about exhibitions, not as an end, but as a means. So there's no purpose in any kind of, I think, in any kind of political art, to tell you the truth, but particularly feminist art, in going into the museum just to stop there to be an object to be admired. It's only interesting if from there it jumps onto something else and back into the community. So for me, it's like fundamental. You know?
I think that now Newfields acquiring and having a piece of the clothesline also gives the clothesline an opportunity or a whole new group of people to be able to engage and converse. These may be people that are not advocates or not in the State House or not there. And so I think it's important as advocates to be able to bring those that may not be as far along in their advocacy journey to engage with a project. Otherwise, we're just talking about issues in bubbles and silos. And so, but Newfields having this there they have their own membership that may be different than the 75 organizations that engage with the Newfields. I know that families go through there, school groups go through there. And so I really think that this is an opportunity for us to engage folks that may not know about it. What I know about the clothesline and what I know about this issue is when people are aware of the stats, aware of the lack of consent legislation, aware that Indiana ranks 4th highest in the nation as far as sexual assault among high school girls, no matter where you fall on the political spectrum, that causes you to take action. The fact that 1 in every 5 Hoosiers has faced this, the fact that 100% of women that are in our criminal justice system have reported sexual assault or violence, that will cause people to have conversations about that. And that's how you get, again, that grassroots advocacy and bringing people that may not agree otherwise as far as political ideologies are concerned to come together to create meaningful and long-awaited change. I also think that this project is unique, as we've all shared, because it's given an opportunity from community members, folks that may not feel comfortable writing in person, they can do so online. It's very therapeutic for a lot of people to be able to share that. And it's also provided an opportunities for little girl from the region to drive down with her mother and show her that she was not alone. Because of the stigma, because of the taboo, and because of this isolation, oftentimes people don't realize how prevalent this issue is. And when you see that, it almost gives you a sense of, I'm not the only one, that there are others out there. And it's provided, I know I've had many conversations with people that are very close to me that wrote a postcard and talked about what happened to them for the first time in their life. And I cannot tell you the number of postcards that I've read that say, I don't feel safe anywhere, but I feel I'm breathing again after writing this. And that to me speaks volumes.
It does. It's incredible. And I've heard that so many times since I've been connected to the project too. Things happen and you bury it deep inside, and someone asking you in a political situation to share it is quite different than through an art process, through a thoughtful engagement with artwork and artists, to be able to put it out there for the first time ever is really incredible. And I think this work, we all owe it a great deal of gratitude for that. Monica, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what changes you have seen in this process from the 70s to now, meaning now it seems you are able to engage organizations like Women4Change, New Fields, social service organizations, I mean, 75 just here in Indiana. So how has that changed from when you first started this work?
Well, when I first started this piece in Mexico City, when there were all 30 of us feminists who really didn't have time to talk about harassment because we were talking about free choice and we were talking about rape to begin with, there was not an awareness of harassment. I think today we have much more of an awareness. I mean, I would go to women and ask, what do you dislike of the city? And they would say the pollution. And I would say, well, don't you hate it when they harass you in the bus or when they touch you in the bus? And they would respond like, yes. They suddenly, for me, the piece in that moment was that moment that when they understood that this wasn't natural, which I think still happens very often. And it happens the moment you write, and it happens the moment you read. I think that continues happening precisely because there's so many different voices that it allows women to feel accompanied and that they share all these very different experiences. So if you felt guilty, which I know happens to many victims, because that's what we're taught, you didn't do enough to take care, and why were you going out? And even as a little girl, because I can perfectly identify that. What did you do wrong that happened to you? Suddenly you're seeing that this is a general situation, and understanding that this is a structural problem, not just a personal problem. So it has changed in that. It has changed in that it's not just the one clothesline that then was asleep for I don't know how many years. Today there's a context where we can talk about these issues, where we can organize about these issues. And that wasn't there. Even in 2016, when I had my exhibition at the MUAC, that I made a little archive of what was different, because people ask me, 30 years and you still haven't been able to change anything. Like if it was that easy to change these kind of things, And what I find is that culturally we have changed, because we're talking about these issues. It's in institutions, it's in organizations. We're getting together to change these things. And that is incredible. That is incredible because it's not that easy to change these things. It has taken a long time, and it will probably take us a very long time still to change all the things we would like to change, because it took us, 10,000 years to build the patriarchy, to create that system, to have it work. It's going to take us a long time because we have to change internally. We have to change with that little girl that suddenly feels that she can speak up against this, because the first thing to stop harassment and violence is to realize that you're a victim of it, or that you've experienced it. And that is not that easy. So I think as women, we have really worked on this in this part, and the project shows it. We are now more prepared to say this shouldn't be like this, and we do not accept it anymore, and we need to make changes. Now we need to change the rest of the system, but that is an incredible achievement. So we still have a lot to do, but we have to recognize what we've done.
Absolutely. And I think that most of everyone that's involved in any kind of work like this understands it is a long game, and that it does take years and years and generations even to change a person's mind, much less an institution. So yeah, it is colossal in its greatness, but we have chipped away at it, absolutely. And so it's a huge success. So I do have some other questions, but I'm noticing there are a lot of really great questions in the chat. So Bryn, do you want to share some of those questions at this point?
Sure, yeah, we can definitely do that. The first question that came in through the chat was from Erin McCutcheon, and she is wondering if everyone could take a moment to reflect on how the pandemic has affected art and activism in their particular locations. And let's see, she says, it has changed so much of our lives, but as feminists, we know that these problems don't cease to exist just because of COVID. Do you all see particular strategies developing in your feminist activism and artistic communities to respond to these issues in different ways?
So I know that we are talking about art today, but I would be remiss if I didn't just reflect on the fact that the last time there was a pandemic, there was a group of feminist activists that actually made significant progress, and that is by which of the 19th Amendment that gave some women the right to vote in the United States. It wasn't until 1965 with the Voter Rights Act that gave all people and all women the right to vote, but the 19th Amendment, the suffragettes actually advocated and made significant progress during the last pandemic, which was exactly 100 years ago. I think where we are today, 100 years later, and again, not just relating with the clothesline, but the issues that Women4Change and so many other organizations have been advocating for has now just been brought to the forefront, and the COVID-19 pandemic has just exacerbated it. I'm thinking about paid family leave and affordable childcare options, and providing women with the long needed economic justice and an economic stability that they deserve. And the fact that here in Indiana, it will be 2083 before Caucasian cisgender women make the same as Caucasian cisgender men is an issue that people are now talking about. And so I think that you see women, and we know this to be true, that we're nimble and we're resourceful. And so we continue to advocate during these very difficult times. But the things that we have been talking about that now lawmakers are noticing, because they're having to deal with it every single day. I'm looking forward to Ann Stack and others that are connected more with the arts far more than I am, to come to us with another great opportunity so that we can talk about these issues. But I think that our advocacy continues. And I think that talking about the suffragettes, as complicated as they were, I would have missed that opportunity if I didn't recognize them.
That's wonderful. I had not heard that. I think it's wonderful. Well, I don't know in other places, but in Mexico, it was day 2 of the pandemic and the feminist artists were already doing projects. Not long ago, about a month ago, we had a forum that was called Inhabiting Uncertainty, that was organized by Maria Minera and Lorena Wolfer. And for about 9 hours over a period of 3 days, they brought together groups basically from Mexico, from all over Mexico, but also some from Latin America, of artists that are working on these issues, particularly throughout the pandemic. Talking about the problems that we're facing on many different levels, and also talking about the projects that we've developed. And you have a whole array of very creative and wonderful projects. But what was very surprising to me was that they were very emotional. It was very emotional for everyone, because it was like, I think what happens with the clothesline sometimes, it was, wow, I've been having this very difficult time throughout the pandemic, and violence has increased, and in the cultural world, nobody has a job, and the situation is so difficult. but we're here and we're doing things, and we're friends, we're a community, you know? So it was very moving to me, because you usually don't get a Zoom meeting or a meeting like this where people can start crying and sharing and also being very happy to find these other people. So I think we'll end up with a huge archive of projects that have come out from art and feminism that have to do with that throughout the pandemic. So I think that would be basically my answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have another question here. This one's from Ann Stack. It's directed to Monica, although I think that this could apply to everyone on the call as well. And I love this question just because it gives, I feel like it gives everyone an opportunity to blue sky a little bit. But through your respective networks, including the institutions which have exhibited your work, Monica, can you just take a moment to imagine what this might look like if it were realized collaboratively and internationally? What would it take to realize this project at that scale? And what are some of the changes that you could imagine?
I mean, it would be wonderful for it to happen. I don't know if it's something, if to have something go viral, it just needs to have a turning point and then it goes viral. I don't know if there's anything one can do to make it turn viral. But I know that March here in Mexico, it was all over the place. It was not all over the world, but it was all over the universities in Mexico. And it was really interesting for me to see how it developed on its own without my assistance. I know there's concern, for example, of what happens when it goes into museums and if it goes back out into the community afterwards. I'm usually very open, and I'd like to say it publicly here, to advise anyone who wants to do a clothesline in their communities, whether they saw it in the museum and Women4Change, and everyone can give them my email. I'm more than happy to do that kind of work to define the quote, to do this kind of thing. But I don't know what it takes. It would be wonderful because particularly now you see the strength, for example, of the Chilean group, Las Tesis, who did this song of the El agresor eres tú, talking to the structure, to the governments, etc., who's really behind this aggression, who's allowing this aggression against women to work. If you don't do something against it, then you're part of the problem. And this went viral all over the world. So I don't know what it takes. It would be wonderful. I think it might start like proposing it and then it can take off from there, having it at demonstrations. They had it here at the main square at the Zócalo in Mexico when we had the big demonstration here on March the 8th. But it's more important, I think, that it works in the smaller communities first, because a huge space outside during a demonstration doesn't give you the time to look and to answer and to give it the attention it needs. It would be wonderful. It would be great. It might be necessary to start through schools or through museums or through a network that already exists, and from there to develop elsewhere. But I'm more than willing to help in any way I can to make this happen.
Thank you so much. And Rima, perhaps you could speak to this as well, just simply because there was sort of an active scaling up as a part of this process, right? I mean, you had mentioned that most of your projects aren't necessarily activating 70 organizations across 150 programs, you know, in each of Indiana's 92 counties. I mean, what did that process look like in terms of scaling up beyond your day-to-day operations?
It was, I'll be honest, that as we continue to scale up, it was thanks to our volunteers. Like, we couldn't have done this alone. It was thanks to all of these individuals coming together. And it wasn't just Women4Change scaling up, but it was everyone collectively scaling up and working together. We would not have been able to do that alone. And I won't sit here and tell you otherwise, because that's not true. And that's what we know of everything is when we can all rally together around something, we can all push each other and push our collective boundaries for collective good. And that's what I want to continue to see, that although there's, the clothesline will now be at Newfields, that doesn't mean that we can't continue to scale up together. That doesn't mean that we can't come together and create and push each other to another realm where we weren't last year. I think that continues, and we have to continue to look at things, as Monica said, and change narratives if we need to, but to continue to work together and scaling up. I have a lot of hope. I think that the clothesline has been a catalyst for change here in our state, and I think that we can continue to make long needed change, and that work continues until we lower some of those data points that I shared, until we're not fourth highest in the nation as far as sexual assault among high school girls, when 1 in 5 Hoosiers have not faced this, when 100% of the women that are currently in our criminal justice system, and that will continue, whether inside the museum or outside the museum or coming together again. And so I will say that while we had 75 organizations and 100 programs, I hope next year when we're coming together, it might be like this over Zoom and Skype, but I hope that we can say that we had 120 partner organizations and 300 programs, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm. I would absolutely love to see that. And then actually speaking to that point, we have a comment from Ann King, who says that Monica's point about moving the Clothesline Project back out to the communities after the IMA has given it publicity is the most important point made today. Perhaps an organization like Women4Change to sponsor it in every county and town fairs, et cetera, which Indiana has so many. Then have someone collect the new notes and publicize the data, but not the names, so that we have the prevalence of abuse always before our eyes. I think that that's, one of the things that is so wonderful about this work in terms of its potential. I think that it operates within the museum in a few different ways. I think one, the act of collecting this work, I feel, opens up a more permanent channel for communication and collaboration with partner organizations to continue to provide a platform to women to speak on their experiences with sexual violence and gender-based oppression. I also think that this work helps us as an institution to develop a framework for collecting and stewarding work like this well into the future. Yeah, I believe that it establishes a really incredible social precedence for how a community and its institutions can align. And so then we have one more question in the chat. This is again from Ann Stack. She says, in Indiana, I found in an informal survey that of 304 individuals asked, only 16 knew who represented them in the Indiana Senate and Indiana House. How best might the study of civics, its history, et cetera, be expressed and explored and encouraged through art?
I will say that another survey, and this is out of Pennsylvania, the University of Pennsylvania, found that only 1/3 of Americans could name all 3 branches of government. Only 1/3 of Americans could name all 3 branches of government. That statistic is equally horrifying to me. And I think that that just shows that when we are asking people to advocate and to engage or even to vote, that we're not at this same level of civic and government understanding. And so I would say that we need a way to engage and inform a broader group of individuals, and we have to take civics education back into Indiana schools. The fact that there's no standard or mandate, but for a lot of us that went through public schools here in Indiana, we spent 4th grade learning about the cardinal and our state flower, but don't understand how local government and national government work should upset everyone, whether you're a parent or not, whether you have a child in school or not, because we're setting up generations of Hoosiers and Americans that are not equipped, that don't understand their government and their rights.
Great, thank you so much. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Shannon, if you have any outstanding questions.
Sure. Yeah, I did want to ask Mónica about the idea that her work has been shared all over the world, and we saw a few examples and images of the project in different countries. And I was wondering if she could talk a little bit about, obviously we've talked a lot about how inspiring the Indiana project was, but are there others that stand out in your mind as being particularly interesting or inspirational that we could leave on a high note?
They are all learning experiences for me, particularly when they go to other communities in other countries, or even, no, actually all of them are learning experiences for me, because it brings me in touch with other communities. One that I'm particularly interested in is the one in Japan at the Aichi Triennale last year, because it was like a mutant coastline. There was censorship, so then it changed, and then a group formed of the people who had my workshop, and they've continued it they have a group called Our Coastline with Mexico, with Mónica. They had one was the Aichi Triennale coastline, and then they had the one with me. And that one has continued and has worked with demonstrations, and they're having it at an exhibition in January. They got a grant to do it again, and they've shown it at universities and embassies. So that one's very interesting to me because it was able to mutate in form completely throughout the Triennale, and then this happened, that it has taken off on its own and it's continued. It's always interesting to me because the projects are supposed to end, and they never do. And I'm sure the one in Indiana will be the same. It was supposed to be a workshop last year, and it continues, and my involvement continues with all of them. But I mean, I tried in one of them in India. Usually the ones I'm invited abroad have to do with more organized art world events. And they had just had a terrible flood in Kerala, and we had just had an earthquake. So I said, I'm going to change the question, and I'm going to ask, what has the earthquake given you and taken away, and what has the flood given you and taken away? And this was like the question. And then 2 weeks before the Kochi biennial started, one of the founders had to step down because he was accused of sexual harassment. So we had to put in the question of sexual harassment, and it would be ridiculous to try to avoid it. So we had another question. So it's interesting to me how the context always comes up, and that I have to change according to what happens. I don't have any pre-established plans. Well, I do, but I know they have to be very flexible to respond to the context.
Thank you, Mónica. I love that, and I love the way you talk about it as this living thing that will evolve and grow and change and adapt, and just like us, and how we have had to do over the pandemic. And I know we started out in the workshops at Newfields in person, and that was amazing. And anybody that was lucky enough to be there to meet you and to spend that time with you, it was an honor, and it was something we'll always remember and be grateful for. But you know, we've adapted, and we're doing this virtually. And one of the benefits, of course, is people that may not be able to go to Newfields to see a lecture or a discussion are able to see it, and we're recording it, and we'll be able to share it, and more eyes will be on it. So again, thank you both so much, and the Newfields team, thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Before we wrap things up, I would just like to thank the diverse membership of Women Changemakers, a 5-member task force of Women4Change. They were the catalyst that brought the clothesline to the Indianapolis Museum of Art at Newfields and enlarged the circle to include prisons, the military, visual, performing and literary arts, academia, and survivors of sexual assault to participate in this project. So many thanks to Women Changemakers. Thank you to Women4Change. Thank you, Rima and Monica, for joining us today. Thank you, Shannon, for moderating. And thank you again to Ann Stack. Without whose support, none of this would be possible. I also just wanted to encourage everybody to please visit El Tendedero, the clothesline exhibition at the Arts Council Gallery 924, which will be up at least through the end of the month, hopefully extending into December as well. So thank you all for joining us here today, and let's keep doing this work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.